Hi friends, so it's been a few days since I've done a video. I've been looking after an ill friend who had an accident, but I've got some time now to do something, and there's been a few things happening in the last few days. This one I wanted to address today is about Julian Assange, and apparently it's very hard to get the facts about this, but WikiLeaks says they have grave concerns about the state of health of our publisher, Julian Assange, who has been moved to the health ward of Belmarsh Prison. This is dated the 30th of May. WikiLeaks has grave concerns about the state of health of our publisher, Julian Assange, who has been moved to the health ward of the Belmarsh Prison. Mr. Assange's health has already significantly deteriorated after 7 years inside the Ecuadorian embassy, under conditions that were incompatible with basic human rights. The United Nations twice found him to have been arbitrarily detained and called on the United Kingdom to honour the commitments under the international law and free him. And just by the way, you probably noticed I'm sitting in a shower. This is the state of things when it's a very windy day in Tasmania. You have to find where you can to do things in the house that's a bit of a building site at the moment. So anyway, so basically this issue, the sun was in my eyes. Basically this issue has hardly been addressed at all about the health situation for Julian Assange. And I would hazard a guess that the reason he is apparently one report is that he is so in such a state now that he's having trouble conversing with people. His lawyers or whatever, he's having trouble communicating. Now that's one of the reasons, of course, why they've transferred him to the health centre in the Belmarsh prison. I have no idea what that health centre is like. It's a very, very harsh maximum security prison, so who knows what it's like. But anyway, if that is true, that he is having trouble actually verbalizing to people, then of course that's very serious. That sounds like a cognitive decline, and I'm not sure if that's because of maybe he has cancer, because when you've been deprived of vitamin D even if you've been taking vitamin D supplements, and I hope that he was when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy for that 7 years, and he was receiving no natural light during that time. I don't know if that is enough sometimes, with all the situations that it was really basically torture, what he was experiencing there. Being sort of in this one room for 7 years and not being able to go out, get exercise, and all the sorts of constraints that were upon him, how much that has affected him psychologically and physically. Even people that have only been in situations like that for a month have trouble bouncing back. It takes them a while, but that's 7 years. If he is having trouble verbalizing, then that's very worrying, of course, and and I've said this before in the times that I've addressed this issue, that that they're trying to kill him, of course, and have been, and also make an example of him. The US has been trying to make an example of him, and sadly, all the colonies of the US, the UK, Australia, my own country, Australia, have all been just doing what the US has been instructing them to do, which is basically, at best, be silent about Julian Assange and just let them get their unjust proceedings underway by extraditing him. I mean, at this point, I don't think that physically, I think he would possibly even die very soon after being, transported to the US, extradited to the US, because I don't think physically he would be capable of even lasting any length of time in their prisons there. He's obviously not, his weight has reduced dramatically inside Belmarsh prison, and he may, as I said, he may have cancer, and vitamin D. If you have deficiency of vitamin D for years on end, you can get serious. You can develop serious conditions, serious illnesses like cancer, diabetes, and so forth. And so that's quite possible. He may have one of those. May have one of those serious illnesses. There's a whole bunch of things that you can get from D deficiency, and of course all the other constraints that have probably led to him being like this as well. And I mean, you only have to remember when he was dragged out of that embassy, in a manner to humiliate him. You could see that his skin was yellow looking and he had aged tremendously. So he was already, and they probably, this is the thing, this is how cruel the US empire is, that they probably wanted to get him out of there before he died so that they could then further make an example of him. You know what I mean? Basically not allow him to die in the embassy, drag him out and then put him in a prison that is like a further torture because it's maximum security, and it's the treatment in there is really awful, apparently. And he's been basically in solitary 23 hours a day in his cell. So, this solitary confinement is a torture. So, it's just so cruel. Even though he might have been put in the health wing of the Belmarsh prison, I mean, they're probably only doing that because of how it might look. But they are trying to kill him. And this is sort of, this is how, this leads me to how the mainstream media now is starting to freak out. And I mentioned this before in my, the video before last. I mentioned that even Rachel Maddow, who has been a big Russiagate cheerleader and who's just been so unhinged in her reporting, and even when she's talking about how it's probably a good idea that this doesn't happen to Assange, that he's not extradited, she still manages to put out more BS that, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are part of promoting a Manchurian candidate, Trump, for Russia, and basically, Trump is Russia's puppet. So, of all the terrible things that Trump is and does, I don't think being a Russian puppet is one of them. I don't think if I was going to choose, if I was Putin and I was going to choose someone, if this was even possible, right, I would not choose Trump. I mean, he's not the brightest bulb in the box, is he? Even though he's very, very good at warmongering, but he's not the brightest bulb in the box. Anyway, but I was watching the Duran today, and they were talking about Peter Lavelle and Alex Christophe, I think his name is. They were talking about how an Australian journalist, they were talking about how an Australian senator has spoken out in support of freedom of the press and Julian Assange. Senator Patrick of South Australia, who replaced Nick Xenophon, he has actually written a blog post in support of Julian Assange and freedom of the press. And it was a well-measured blog post, and I think this is a very important occurrence because as if you've been following Australian politicians, they do not talk about this at all, and when they do, they mouth this ridiculous thing. They used to say this in this last 7 years, Mr. Assange has all the, is afforded all the various rights and consulate support. And they just refuse to acknowledge that he didn't have that support really, because he couldn't even get out of the embassy without being arrested by the British. And then, as he rightly feared, being extradited to the US to be thrown in prison for 170 to 175 years, it turns out. That's what they want to put him in prison for espionage, when really Mr. Assange was just doing journalism. That is his crime, journalism. This is something, what he did, what he has been doing with WikiLeaks is what journalists do every single day of the week all over the world. And so Rachel Maddow and her cohorts, all these different pretend journalists, these fake journalists who are just really stenographers and just promote the government narrative or the Democratic Party narrative or whatever, suddenly they're realizing that this could happen to them. And, they may be sort of celebrated by the party they support, which is like people like Rachel Maddow will say anything to support the Democratic Party. They may be safe when, say, the Democratic Party is in office, their nominee is the President of the United States, but say somebody worse than Trump, and that, worse than Trump is put in. Of course, I'm not saying that the Democratic Party doesn't vilify whistleblowers. Obama did so, and nobody in the Democratic Party, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or any of those people, nobody's sticking up, as far as I can tell, for Julian Assange. So, that's the sorry state of affairs in the Democratic Party. But I'm just saying that if a GOP candidate who was worse than Trump and more fascist than Trump got in, and let's face it, they're all warmongers and they're all anti-freedom of the press and all of this, all of them, both sides of both major parties, but in the US. But if somebody got in that was really, really completely fascist, they could, haul Rachel Maddow over the coals and put her in prison and say that she's an enemy of the state and all that kind of thing. So I think they're starting to wake up that this is something really, really serious that could affect them. I don't think any of them particularly care about freedom of the press. I really don't, but they care about their own lives. And so that's why they're talking about this now, which is a good thing. It's good that, and people should support, people should congratulate them for finally talking about this when they should have been talking about Julian Assange all along. Whether they liked him or didn't like him is irrelevant. That he is, he's a political prisoner. He has been a political prisoner in the Ecuadorian embassy for those 7 years. Now he's in Belmarsh prison, being tortured, and possibly this may be a terminal condition for Julian Assange. Whether he is extradited to the US, where he'll die in prison there, or he dies because of all the being a political prisoner and the unjust laws that he's actually is still in prison. The man is a hero and should be lauded as a hero globally, and it's possible that he may die even before being extradited to the US at this rate, if reports of his health are true. And that is very, very sad. I feel very, very sad about it. So, anyway, the thing probably that makes me saddest about this is that the state of affairs in the world today, where things are so cruel that you can see somebody, well, this happens all over the world, it's not just Assange, but the level of cruelty in the world towards people, the unjust behavior towards people who are trying to do the right thing is so criminal and so barbaric. And that is one of the things that I find so disturbing about this, that right before our eyes somebody is being tortured ongoing, and there's been a complete abandonment by politicians all pretty much over a lot of the Western world. And in my own country, to see the political system in Australia that is so far gone, so bereft of any moral integrity, when the best that, say, Tanya Plibersek, who was the deputy opposition leader, basically retweeting Neera Tanden, who had tweeted, Neera Tanden is a sort of a she says she's a liberal, but she's really a neoconservative warmonger. And Tanya Plibersek, I did a video on that, retweeted that anybody who supports Assange are cultists, basically. And that's the best you can get out of. And I've heard one of the Greens say something that basically pushing that Putin puppet thing. This is the Greens in Tasmania. I've heard maybe 2 or 3 Greens politicians mention something about him, but they've just gone quiet again. It's this feeble milquetoast response to something that is a threat to all journalism and freedom of the press today. Because if they can extradite, and that's the thing that is probably the most disturbing to me, is that either these politicians don't realize, and I don't believe they're that stupid, and if they are, they shouldn't be in politics, but either they don't realize that this is as dangerous as it is, which in this case, which means that they shouldn't be in office if they don't realize this is an attack on the press and on democracy, or they are purposefully being quiet because they know that it is, they think it's some sort of political suicide to stand up for Julian Assange. And to talk about this because the US has we are such US lackeys here in Australia. We're just a colony of the US. So they know what to talk about and what not to talk about here in Australia. They just don't have the moral courage to stand up for what is right. And this is not just about a human being who has been basically tortured psychologically and physically for the last 7 years, and it's still ongoing, and it's just getting worse. And it's possible that he might die because of it before he even gets extradited to the US. It's not even though to me that's a very, very important issue. Every single human being on the planet is important. Whether you like them or not, they're important. We all deserve rights, all of us. And I would like to see equality in this world. I really would. But it's not just about Julian Assange. It's about freedom of the press. It's about journalism. And if this can happen to an Australian citizen, if the US can extradite anybody from anywhere in the world that is inconvenient to them, and they can make up stuff, because they make up lots of stuff. It's really hard to find out what is truth anymore. And I'm not talking about the fake news that is thrown about. Fake news is used now to demonize real news and to demonize real fake news, which is like all the Russiagate nonsense and stuff. It's all been fused together, thanks very much to the Murdoch press and to the 6 corporations that run most of the media in the world, and also to politicians and sort of so-called intellectuals who are just really in the pockets of government or whatever, or corporations. So it's really hard to know what is real and what is not, and that's why once you find an independent news source that you can trust, and it's good to have a few independent news sources, and I point these out fairly regularly on my channel. You grab onto them with both hands, and you hang onto them tight, and you support them as much as possible, either financially or any way that you can, disseminating information. But if this can happen to an Australian citizen being extradited to the United States, be thrown in prison for 170 to 175 years, it can happen to anyone. Anybody. They'll start to then, after they've gone after the journalists, well, worldwide, then they'll start to go out, look out for people like, people who are doing podcasts that are talking about issues that are inconvenient, like war crimes and so forth. It never stops. Fascism, this is what it is really. Fascism doesn't stop at just one thing. It just keeps going like a virus. It starts to go all over. It will start to attack anybody, and then everybody becomes like the poisonous kitchen, like the Hitler going after various, people who were exposing corruption, etc. So anybody can be gone after for exposing corruption and war crimes, etc. That's the precedent that this sets. And so any politician in Australia that doesn't understand that at this point doesn't deserve the office of... I don't think a lot of politicians deserve the office anyway, because they're just too much in the pocket of the US, and they're too much in the pockets of corporations, and they wouldn't know how to get out of their neoliberal, neoconservative mess if you showed them a map. I think they're just so far gone. But any politician that doesn't understand how dangerous this is doesn't deserve to be in office. And so I'm very, very glad that Senator Rex Patrick from South Australia has written this blog and put it and tweeted it. And I hope this becomes a trend in Australian politics. And I hope that, and I called Senator Patrick's office this morning and congratulated him on his moral courage when this is very unpopular to stick up for Julian Assange, and also to put one and one together and realize that this is about press freedoms, and it's not about whether you like Julian Assange or you don't like him. This is about the life of a person, of course, and that's very, very important. But it is about democracy and press freedoms and journalism. So I thanked his whoever the secretary was there in his office today for doing that, and I invite anybody from all over the world to send an email to Senator Rex Patrick, and I will leave his email address in the information section of this video on Faint Signals from Vega on YouTube, and I hope that you will email him if you can't call him, and please thank him for sticking up for democracy and press freedom and journalism, and for sticking up for a man's life, Julian Assange, which looks like it could possibly end before, it could end if he doesn't bounce back in this health center. I don't even know what the care is like. He could quite easily be terminally ill at this point, which is an absolute tragedy. Absolutely an absolute tragedy, since he is a hero. So please thank him, and please encourage him to encourage other politicians to start speaking out. See, the ball is rolling, and this is like, you have to catch this wave when you see it and use it. And catch the wave. Catching the wave also means support, also means giving positive feedback to even people who have helped create this situation of vilifying journalism and vilifying and the whole fake news thing and stuff, and that is the mainstream media. If they've actually created this situation for Assange and for vilification of journalism and stuff like that, and the nonsense about Russiagate and all of that, like Rachel Maddow and the likes, MSNBC and CNN and all of that. But if they say something that is in support of press freedom and support of Julian Assange, then thank them for it, because this could start the ball rolling and the tide turning, since they are the manufacturers of consent for war, which they're very good at being, but they realize that their own careers are at stake here and their own lives are at stake here, and now they're starting to freak out. And so you can use that selfish freaking out that they're doing about themselves and hopefully turn the tide of public opinion to recognize the importance of journalism, that it is at stake. The last vestiges of anything decent in journalism, WikiLeaks and the like, are at stake here, and that we need to do something. This is absolutely a historical moment where, if this is allowed to happen, the extradition of Julian Assange, then it means that all journalism, all press freedom now is threatened, and they can do that to anybody. So I invite everybody to literally catch that wave and thank people like Rachel Maddow, even though it makes me feel a bit ill, the thought of that, because she's been so detrimental. She's been a warmonger, a cheerer. She's been Russiagate promoted to the absolute hysterical, deluded capacity. Really, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But people like that who are feeling threatened now about their own career and their own lives, we can exploit that because it's right. They should be afraid, and we can maybe help change by encouraging them to continue on talking about this. We can maybe change the tide of public opinion, and also, which then sometimes politicians pick up on, or maybe they can think now is the environment is more friendly for me to actually say something about press freedom and democracy, etc. So this is an opportunity, and we must use it. So anyway, that's all I was going to say. I actually was going to talk about a number of things. I'll just quickly say that talking about warmongers, 400 Congress members, I think it was about 75% of Congress members have been written to Trump or encouraging Trump to escalate a war in Syria because Iran and Russia. I mean, these are the level of lack of leadership one has in the Congress. They're just corporate-loving, military-industrial serving sort of puppets who are getting lobbyist money from weapons industry and all sorts of industries, and this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to cause a World War III. And that's 400. That's 75%. Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard didn't sign that letter, but I mean, Bernie Sanders has done his own efforts with Russiagate. He's been promoting anti-Russian propaganda. He's been signing on to various war bills over the years, but now he's so he's not 100%. He's culpable for the warmongering in the past, of course, but at least they didn't sign that letter. But this shows the quality of people in Congress, and this is the most dangerous empire in the world. I call it an empire because it has 800 plus bases worldwide, and it is at the center of most of the violence that's happening in the world. It's looking for wars constantly. And we can't blame John Bolton, and we can't blame Pompeo, but they're helped because Trump is going along happily with it. Even if he protests that he doesn't want new wars, he's quite okay with it. And I think he's just saying that because because before he was elected, he was promising that he wasn't going to be starting wars. So he's trying to pretend like this is all out of his control, but it's not. He could sack Bolton right now. He could sack Pompeo right now, and he could stop short this warmongering against Iran and against Venezuela and against Syria and all the hosts of other places where they're meddling. But he won't. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. There are other things I could talk about, but I won't. I'll just leave it there. So please contact Senator Rex Patrick and thank him very much. And please, I think that would be a really good thing to do. And please encourage him to be talking to other Australian senators. And maybe something might happen. Maybe at least he might get to die in his own country. That's a very sad thing to say. But, I mean, I think that could be where it's at now, that Julian Assange might have the opportunity to die in his own country. Not that I'm thinking he probably loves Australia, but he probably is so disgusted with these Australian politicians, maybe he doesn't want to come anywhere near here anymore. I don't know. I don't blame him. Anyway, so thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. Please subscribe if you like the content. Please click the notifications bell. Otherwise, you don't receive any updates about videos that are dropped. And please click the like button if you like it, and always leave comments if you feel you would like to. That's great. And let me know in the comment section if you have contacted Senator Patrick. That would make me very happy. Okay, so thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time, bye for now.